Welcome to another episode of the Create Smarter podcast. My name is Marissa Uleski, and I am here with Phil and Kyle. And we are here today to talk about end-of-the-year content creation and marketing techniques. 'Tis the time of year, 'tis the season. So I wanted to start out the conversation by asking, what do you guys like? What do you like seeing from brands? What do you not like? Like, what are we going to see at the end of the year that brands are going to be posting?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's so tricky. I mean, you think about, like, especially with consumer stuff, like most of the time it's deals. It's like 10% off, 50% off, Black Friday, extended, get your order in now. So it's always kind of tricky of what marketing is, especially when it comes to B2C or B2B. B2B, I think there's a lot of cool things that we can do. And I think that's more where we want to focus this conversation. But it's always like, it's hard to realize what breaks through the noise, especially during the holidays, right?
Yeah, and you see it with the trends. I know there's one specifically that you want to talk about, Marissa, but another one that comes to mind for me is one that like used to prop up organically, and I don't know where it even came from, but it's like the Instagram top 9. And it used to be like the app that you could generate, like, oh, these were the top 9 most liked photos of my year. And it's like the whole point of that is like looking back and it's like feeding into your own ego of like, this is what I did this year. And there's like a lot of vanity involved, but it's also, I think, what makes end of year marketing really effective. You know, if you talk about the consumer stuff, but also we can talk about the B2B side as well, is just a reminder of why that platform or that product was something that you enjoyed using. So with like the Instagram top 9, it's like, oh, I really liked sharing all these photos of my family and my travel and my friends, you know, with the world. And, you know, when it's a sale or something like that, it's similar to say, oh, I really enjoyed that product earlier this year. Maybe I will get another one for a family or friend, right? So when it's a sales thing, it fits that way. But I think the most effective year-end marketing is tied to the idea of reminding people why they either enjoyed that product throughout the course of the year or what they missed out on by not using it as much. Yeah,
I think this time of year is like everything plays on the nostalgia factor. Like, you know, oh, let me take a walk down memory lane and look back at the past year and like, oh, I forgot this was this year. Oh my gosh. So like, especially when it comes to, you know, people in their personal posts, they like to see like what happened this year. But kind of for posts in general and social trends that you kind of see happening, how do you kind of break through the noise of all of the year end content? Because everybody's going to be doing it. That's kind of how you fill your social channels towards the end of the year, is creating all those numbers and graphics and stuff like that. So,
I mean, just kind of hint on what you were saying. It's a great opportunity to show that you're a good actor when it comes to your client or a prospect's data, right? That's one of the ones that you're really referring to, is like, hey, I've gathered this data. Like you're saying, it's a nostalgia moment. It's time to remember, especially this when most of the people are like, end of the year, what happened in 2023? So utilizing data is a brilliant way, especially if you're showing like, hey, we're doing a good job with your data, we're protecting it, we're showing sort of the cool tentpole events that we've gone through. Here's some really interesting numbers of either projects we've done, places we've been to. Like, that's a really cool way to stand out and try to break through the noise of like, hey, we're using your data. And as a client, you're like, oh wow, like they are collecting data, they are paying attention to this stuff. And that's really cool to see like vendors that I partner with doing really cool things.
I think it ties back to something that we talk about for any concentrated campaign, whether it's a day of giving or a commencement or anything where you want to cut through the noise, and that's leveraging real people and second-level influencers. So it's, how do I get the users and the people who are, you know, going to touch their own networks to post about this, right? So in the case of like a giving day, we talk about, we're going to work with, you know, at colleges or universities, we're going to work with, you know, people who have their own big followings in the audience we want to get to. And for them, that's clubs and organizations and athletics teams and things like that. So when you talk about end of the year campaigns for, you know, consumer brands, it's how do we get people with their own big followings to take something that we're creating and amplify it on their own channels, as opposed to us being responsible for reaching everybody from our own channel. And I think that influencer marketing is going to just become bigger and bigger. And sometimes, depending on, you know, your user base and who your brand is, for B2B, it might be more of a one-to-one ask. Hey, you know, our biggest client, this is the project we did. We want to tag them or provide them something that they can post that says, look what we did, you know, on our projects in 2023. We want to share it with the world. Whereas when it's a consumer brand, it's like, can we get everybody on this platform to post this year-end wrap-up? So in both cases, it's leveraging the second-level network and building that trust of people beyond your brand account to say, hey, these are other people who, enjoyed the platform this year, enjoyed the product this year. Don't take it from us, take it from them.
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of like people like to see themselves in these things.
Oh,
They're
what do you say?
Yeah, like little egotistical that way, but it's like, if brands are posting, oh, this is how you made us successful this year, like you played a part in this. I think that kind of plays into like the shareability factor, and like, people can point to it and be like, oh, like we helped make this happen, all that stuff.
Just to jump on that real quick,
yeah.
I think that is specifically true for like a nonprofit or an organization that's accepting donations. That's
sure.
going to play really well at the end of the year. Here's the impact statement from this year. Here's how you helped us help all these sick people, or help save all these dogs, or help combat hunger, whatever it is. Here's how you were a part of that. And of course, if I donated to that organization, I'll be like, hell yeah, I want to tell people about that. There's a reason I gave to it. I care about it. Let me tell people so that they know that I did it, but also that hopefully they jump on board and do it too. So what you just described, I think, is like especially important and hopefully relatively simple for a nonprofit to do, especially if you've been collecting impact stories, throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the big things that comes to mind when we talk about end of year marketing and making the marketing about people themselves is Spotify Wrapped.
Oh yeah.
I think that
The
GOAT. I think that is like started like 2015, 16, something like that. And everybody loves it come the end of the year. Like that's the one thing that I love when people share their Spotify Wrapped. I actually want to see it from other people. Why do you guys think it works so well?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, listen, we were in the room and the day it came out, you immediately were like, Spotify Wrap came out. I think everyone in our little edit base stopped to pull up theirs and see what it is. They're brilliant. I mean, the way they utilize the data, they're good actors in that sense because they come up with little things that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a perennial like persuader. Like,
yeah, like
all these
what's your
fun
listening
things they do.
personality?
Yeah.
Right,
So they're pretty smart of like little ways that you glom on, and like they kind of go against that. Is it the ego or the id? What's one of the ones? They do whatever is like in your brain of like, oh yeah, I'm this. This totally
Yeah,
does
yeah.
me.
I think that's id.
What we've seen the whole like they totally got me, and they're like, oh yeah, no Dutch, you're
Of course
it's
they
you.
got you.
Yeah. They know exactly what you listen
they
to.
They nailed it. Yeah, they nailed it.
They're collecting
you
your data.
input the data. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you mentioned it. It's like it's this thing of like you kind of want to like what you listen to on a daily basis is like so much about you as a person. It like says so much about your personality and like your trends. So in our case, Kyle, I know the same is true for you as it is for me. So much of it is like kids music.
Yeah.
And that just like sums up so much of your last year and is like a warm feeling of like, oh my God, my life is so much different. And isn't it like, oh, I'm complaining because it's all songs from Moana, but it's sweet. And it makes me think back to like, oh, every day I'm driving my kid home from school and like she's making me blast Moana and yelling at me. And that's like, that's so much like a part of your personality. And you talk about the nostalgia and it's like, you want to share that with people because it's like your story, right? And so it just works specifically really well for that product. And it's the same with like the photos, right? It's your story and you want to talk about it.
I don't know if you guys saw this, but like with podcasts, I saw like it turned into this random flex game of I'm in the top 0.001% of like this listener. I saw some of that with the artists too, especially
For sure.
Taylor Swift
Yeah.
was amazing of like how many minutes and hours people put in. But it is also, it's such an interesting year-end wrap because like for one hand, it's Spotify. Like, yeah, we're promoting this. But on the other hand, you're like, oh man, this show that I listen to or this thing that I like really, this genre, this artist, this group that I'm really into, like I am the 0.05% listener group or this type of thing. Like it is just, again, like I'm saying it a bunch, but like how well they use data is one of the coolest things about
So
Spotify
good.
Wrap.
And it validates the idea of like, I know I'm a big Demi Lovato fan. Like, I know it.
Biggest one of the
I'm going
office.
to pride myself on that.
And I do, but it's very validating at the end of the year to be like, I know I listen to a lot, but I'm in the top 0.5% of Demi Lovato listeners in the world. Like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna tell people because I
Yeah.
love Demi. Like I'm listening to her all the time, and so now I get to like, yeah, see,
Yeah,
you know?
that was kind of my thought too. I was like, I expanded the genres of music I listened to this year, and I was like, this better show up in my Spotify Wrap. Like, I expanded
You're
what I
gaming-
listened to.
You're gaming the system.
Yeah,
throughout
I
the course of
am.
the
I'm like,
year.
when is it going to come out? When should I listen to this stuff the most? But when you think about it, I mean, maybe it existed before this, but like I can't even think back to like before Spotify Wrapped because I feel like all of the content that comes out now, everybody's kind of doing like a wrapped type thing. Like even Amazon, I noticed the other day, like if you go to your cart or your account or something, it'll tell you how much you saved with Prime
Right.
and like all that stuff. So like other companies are jumping on this like wrapped trend. And I feel like it started with Spotify. I could be wrong.
Well, but you talk about like the why, and like for Amazon, the whole point is like, oh, it's, you know, fast shipping, but it's also like their big thing they want to prove to you is like, yeah, you're getting the best deals by being on Amazon. So that's what they're reminding you of. They don't need to be like, look at everything you purchased. You know, you purchased 24 giant packs of diapers, right? Like, that's not as much for them. It's more about like, oh man, this was super worth it, right? Whereas for Spotify, it's like, oh, cool, this is who I am as a person, right? The story of my year. But they're both, you know, effective. And you look at Amazon, you're like, okay, yeah, great. It's worth that $109 a year or whatever it is to be a Prime member. You know?
I feel like a lot of streaming services want to be able to do what Spotify does, but sometimes you're like, it just reminds you like, oh, I'm not really using that. Why am I paying for this right now? I don't really get that much out of it. So like I could see it also backfiring at some points where you're like, oh man, like that's why you got to be smart with how you're displaying this and like tricking your user almost in the sense of like, oh yeah, no, I'm really into this stuff, even though like, oh man, you log on like you are in this bottom tier of how many people are using the streaming platform.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's about playing to your strengths, right? Of like, and that's like when you're a B2C company, more of that like audience of one thing. It might not be, oh, you worked with us every day of the whole year, but it might be like, hey, look at this one really cool thing we did for you. Please share that back out to remind people, as opposed to, hey, you know, we worked with this company every single day of the year. It's more of a quality over quantity thing.
Yeah.
And for a service that's, you know, a streaming service where maybe the numbers aren't as consistent as Spotify, like you have Spotify on every day, you don't, it might be more of that like quality over quantity thing where it's like, oh, this show that you loved, like relive some of those moments and convincing people to go back and watch it again, like that kind of thing. So you're spot on there, right? Because it could backfire to be like, oh damn, I haven't watched Apple TV in a hot minute.
I need to get rid of that
that.
damn Planet Fitness membership. But I'll say the one thing, like back to your kind of like audience of one thing, I think something you do that's really great with marketing is like your ability to take sort of our outtakes from our stuff and really it shows that like us as a team or as a client we're a vendor for all of our clients, right? But showing that we had fun at their stuff, which I think is something that a lot of clients that we deal with want to see. They do like that we enjoy working with them, and we do enjoy working with them. That's how we approach as a partnership. So the way you did it last year, where you had this really cool, like all of our little outtakes and our little like us having fun with that stuff, I think that's an audience of one. I think that's something where your audiences, your clients are watching and be like, oh wow, they did really enjoy my thing. Like it makes them feel special in that sense because they think of us as like, oh, you guys are broadcasters. You do this all the time. You must not even be fazed by any of this stuff. And a lot of times during the shoots, we act very serious and it's hard to like catch us in that moment of like fun. But I think that is something that they, especially with partnerships, like especially with how we approach our kind of our product, that's something that they really like to see. And I think kudos to you of how well you've done that. And I think a lot of people shared it because of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. The human element of it for a services company is really important. I do want to go back. I have a question real quick. Would Spotify Wrapped specifically be so effective if they shared your stats with you throughout the course of the year? You talk about gaming the system. If throughout the course of the year you were able to access those stats and you knew where you stood on stuff, would it be as effective? Because you can't see your listening stats as far as I know throughout the course of the year.
I feel like if you could check in on it throughout the year, first of all, there's not like that waiting for it factor. Like everybody knows around November, Thanksgiving-ish is when Spotify Wrapped comes out and you wait for that moment and you're like, oh, I wonder what it's going to look like. I think if you were able to check your stats throughout the year, it would be less of a surprise factor and like a, really wanting to see it. I think it would be less popular. And I think it would start skewing data because you're like, oh, I actually don't want people to know that I listen to a lot of Harry Styles. I'm going to start listening to something else. I think it would be not as authentic and people wouldn't be as excited about it.
It's just interesting because you do think like they have the data in real time. Like why don't they provide it? Is it
It's water cooler moment.
Is it for Wrapped?
Like, yeah, it's for Wrapped. It's for the water cooler. It's you coming in the office going, Wrap dropped, and everyone's stopping what they're doing. They're going to that product they're talking about. I'm sure the mentions and the amount of awareness that they got during that time, the people left out. I saw jokes about being like, you wish you had Spotify Wrapped, but your damn wife got the Apple Pot music thing, and you don't get any of this fun stuff. Like you have a feeling of left out. Like it's all built around that moment.
Well, you see other brands. I saw like BU Hockey did like a BU Hockey Wrapped, and they like. Right. They take the Spotify like brand and they put in their own thing, like, oh, one Beanpot won 25 game, whatever. And like you see tons of other brands goofing off and copying that. And like as far as Spotify is concerned, that's like the biggest compliment you could possibly receive, right? Like people like taking that and running with it and like making it into a meme basically, right?
It's a cultural
like,
meme that I created that everyone can follow and they know exactly what they're doing. Like it's amazing by Spotify for how well that whole thing has worked out.
And they added a lot to the point of them like saving it and creating it as an event. Like they added elements into it this year that they didn't have before. They had little videos from the artists that you followed and things like that. They were selling merchandise. They were using it as a vehicle to sell tickets to shows. So like they're definitely using it, like seeing the popularity of it and using it to try to lump other things in there, which is to say, oh, we're not going to just make this a fun social marketing thing. It's also like, oh, how can we leverage this and make it something that works for us from like a sales standpoint for other things as well.
And we also sell tickets. We do this. You can do merch. You can do all these things. I mean, it's a brilliant, it's brilliant. Like at the end of the day, what they do with that is genius. So what can you be doing at the end of the day with your marketing is kind of the question with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like that's a big question. I'm supposed to be asking you guys questions. I don't know the answer to that. But I wanted to go back to the personalized and human factor of this all. One of my favorite things to do at the end of the year is to jump on like a TikTok trend of like all the quick hits of pictures and stuff like that throughout the year. One of personally my favorite things to do is go through and look back at all of our fun moments on site, at shoots, at events, and kind of put them all together into one video with whatever trending sound is around at that time of year, and kind of put that out. And I think that's also a really great way to bring everyone down memory lane, but also like kind of incite the nostalgia factor for all of us and the clients that see the fun that we had working on their projects.
Now we just got to do the Spotify and try to also introduce the other like productions we did. Like, oh, this was an all hands production. This was a media day production. Like try to help them remember, oh, wow, like they're having fun, but wow, I didn't know they did this too.
Yeah.
Like, that's the winning recipe.
Yeah. And I mean, you're kind of like, you guys have like kind of joked about it a little, but I think that the bottom line is like, show your clients or your user base or whatever, just show them some love, right? And be like, hey, you helped us have a great year, right? And how do you do that, whether it's through marketing or outreach or, whatever it is? And I think like the biggest thing is like, what do people love about your product or your platform, and how do we remind them of that at the end of the year and show them a little love and make them feel special? The individualization of the Spotify Wrapped is like something you might not quite be able to achieve at scale, depending on how big your user base is and how good your data is. But you can, make your client base feel special and reach out to them and be like, hey, thanks for a great year, right? And I think ultimately it comes down to that of make people feel seen and, remind them that, it's one of those opportunities to reach out to people when you're not asking for something too. Hey, we're giving you something. We're not asking for something. So what it is even less important than the fact that you're doing it, right? Of just, I know we ask for stuff all the time. Here's just something we're giving to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right, the individual stuff is gifts, like things that you can do are just like the typical marketing. I mean, it's don't forget the face of your father, send him little gifts, little trinkets, little like, hey, remembering you, thank you for helping us have a great year, and like here's to the next year type of stuff.
Drop a Dark
Tower
reference?
Did drop a Dark Tower reference. I was trying to see if I could sneak it in, but
went over my head. I don't know what's going on.
See, I got it. But like, I mean, that's part of like, it's not just like sending gifts to be like, oh, hey, here we go, like I'm really good. It's the individual effort, right? Like we're like, you don't have as many people as a Spotify, you don't have that many users. That's a really great way to just get in front of your clients and just remind them like, hey, we really appreciate everything you did. Here's us giving thanks and giving to you.
We know Spotify Wrapped is going to show the audiobooks you were listening to now. It's going to show Dark Tower next year.
I don't have Spotify Premium. I have Family Premium, so I'm ruined.
Wrapped is just going to become a premium feature. You'll have to pay more to get Wrapped.
I really hope not, but I think I would do it. I'm not going to lie to you. And that's how you know it works.
Pay $1 to see your Wrapped.
Yes.
Wow. They would make money.
They'd make so much money.
Sure would.
Yeah.
Okay, cut that from this. Spotify, don't listen.
Don't take that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Do you guys have a service or a platform that you wish did Wrapped for you guys?
I mean, I'm sure it does it, but like the workout stuff, like with my watch, like would be kind of cool. But like that's like I was thinking about that immediately.
You say you're sure it does it.
Yeah.
I know Strava does it, and that's cool. Do you have Strava or no?
No, I don't have Strava. iOS.
Yeah,
Apple
no, it,
use
it all
yeah.
ties together. Strava is like a fitness tracking, like an all-inclusive fitness tracker,
Yeah.
and they do what you're describing, right? So at the end of the year, you can see I ran this many miles, I biked this much. Like,
Yeah, make yourself feel proud about
what
it.
this
yeah.
says to me is you should be a Strava user. If that's something you value, you
I'm
should
sure
get
it's on my
Strava.
watch. You know, what? My 18 birdies. That's what I want to see. How many bogeys did I get? How many birdies? I know how many birdies. I got one. That's it through the
no.
entire season.
One more than I got.
But like Peloton would be another good one. I know both of us use
I think
Peloton.
they probably do.
They probably
But that's the
do
thing.
it.
You say this, and it's like you talk about cutting through the clutter.
It's not on my phone. It's not something I'm using constantly.
Yeah.
Like the rap works because I'm on my phone. I'm listening to Spotify every single day. Like you say, it's a different experience. Like I wonder. I'm trying to think out loud of what it would be, but I mean I can't.
And that asks the
imagine.
question too of timing. Like, should you wait till the new year to do it? Right.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
if you're sending it out now, does it get lost too much in
Yeah,
all?
'cause
Everybody's doing it right.
I think that Spotify does it earlier because if they did it any later, it would just be like holiday music would
Right,
kind of
right.
get in there and kind
Right.
of mess with
They
everybody's
basically just cut
numbers.
December
That's what my wife
out.
says. She's
Yeah.
like, yeah, the reason they do it now is because it's just like, man, you really love Christmas. You're like, no, it's right now.
Yeah.
That I'm listening.
So we'll have
this.
to check around the new year to see if like any of our other things do it and we just haven't noticed. But that's how you know Spotify Wrapped works and it's super shareable. So like that's why it's so front and center because everybody will share it.
Yeah.
But
I bet Peloton does something similar. If they don't, they should. Same with Strava. They definitely do something similar. And I've looked at it before. It's really interesting because that's also like with fitness tracking. I think is a huge one for this because it's like you want to see what kind of progress you made, right? And
Right.
January is the time where you're like, oh crap, I got to get back on it, right? So like that's
smart.
That's a big one.
But the difference with that, right, is Strava, it's same with the Apple Fitness. You have to start the workout. You have to, it doesn't actively do it. So, like, you
Right.
kind of were already doing the work. Like, what really stands out with Spotify is you, like, weren't thinking about it because you're just
Yeah.
like, I'm
All year
using the,
long.
yeah,
Right.
like, that's the one difference. But,
I'm
yeah.
trying
I mean,
to think what are some of the other ones that would be cool. I know Kindle does something similar. Talks about like your year and that's like how many pages you read, how many hours you read, and that kind of
Right.
thing. And that's a fun one, similar to Spotify, where it's like a passive media consumption. And those work really well, I think, because unlike video streaming services, like I'm only using one service to read my books. I'm only using one service to listen to my music. Whereas with video, I'm using 20 different services, right? So
Right.
like a
Right.
Wrapped for Netflix wouldn't be effective because sometimes I'm on Netflix, sometimes
splitting
I'm
your
on
time.
Hulu,
Yeah.
but I'm only listening to music on Spotify. I'm only reading books on
you
Kindle.
also don't feel as bad. Like, if it was like, congrats, you're in the 0.5% of
Yeah.
like watching television. You're like, oh, God.
how did I get in the top
needed
10
to,
watching
I needed
The
to
Office?
move.
it's funny because I was trying to think of the answer for me for that question. And I was like, I really like hope that some of these don't. Like, I don't want to know how much Chipotle I ordered this
That's
year.
a
Like,
good point.
it's probably going to make me buy less Chipotle. Like, they're probably...
That's a really good point. though.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
As you guys are talking about fitness, I'm like, how much food did I order this
but
year?
no, that might be an example where you don't want to know that,
Yeah.
right? But for Chipotle, they're big on like sustainability and stuff. Maybe they'll be like, your online orders helped save 20 trees, right? Like,
Yeah. Right.
there's always an angle
Yeah.
when you have the data, right?
I think like Nest does that, where like
Yeah.
you get the email of like, here's how well you did during the year, like with your
Yeah.
home owning and stuff
Yeah.
like
you
that.
can tell how much we like it by the derisive way we talk about it. Like, it obviously doesn't work quite as well.
I think one thing to go back to is you mentioned how it's like shareable Spotify is, which is kind of amazing because it really isn't a great platform for sharing 9 times out of 10.
Right, yeah.
Like we laugh about their whole video podcast and they're like, use us for video. You're like, but you're not a good sharing like platform for
Yeah.
that. So it's like so interesting that they really crush it with this one time.
At the end of the Wrapped little story or whatever you click through, they give you things that you can
I know.
post and they offer you options. They give you
Different
all
color
different
schemes,
colors
yeah.
and different styles. So it's like they want you to share it. They make it very easy.
But throughout the course of the whole thing, I found myself screenshotting it. This is a note
Yes.
for the developers next year. Make a download button on every
Well,
slide.
they got fired
Yeah.
after they made it. So
they did. Yeah. Well, that's
That's a whole other
That's a lesson here,
thing.
though. They got all this positive press from Wrapped, and they did layoffs, and like nobody knew, right? They did Wrapped and got all the positive press, and
sort
the
of.
layoff news cycle thing didn't hit them that hard.
Not as
they buried
bad,
it a little
but
bit. So
people heard about it.
people heard it. People
Yeah.
are always going to hear about it, but they got their big bump and all their shares and everybody on the platform. So
Yeah.
it's also an active users thing, right? If you haven't been on the platform in a little while, this is you
Reactivate,
see everybody
yeah.
posting Wrapped, and you get a notification, you're going to go check it out. So
Yeah, exactly.
now I'm thinking of what else I want.
I know. Now we got that.
What do you
covered.
want? What do you want to know?
What are my hopes? What are my dreams? What other Wrapped do I want? I don't know. I have to give it more thought.
All right. We'll have to do a follow-up.
Great if they could do it with work. They just like everything you did at your job just passively gets like, this is how many hours you spent like doing Wordle. You're like, okay, ignore that.
Yeah,
part.
how many
Let's do the
hours
actual
do you
editing.
spend playing
you're
small basketball in the lunchroom?
You want us to put like a
How many
data
hoops?
tracker on everyone's computers? This is how many hours you spent on the New York Times mini
Just
crime.
makes the one-on-one like the end of year. You're like, this is what I did. Here's the data. I have to write
Oh
up this
man, I don't know
false
if we're gonna
narrative.
want to see that.
Oh, I'm throwing ChatGPT at our
I do
one-on-one at
not.
the end of
I
this
do not
thing.
want to see that. Anyways, I think that wraps up our wrapped conversation.
Whoa.
Ayo.
Good job.
Until next time on the Create Burner podcast, we are Marissa, Phil, and Kyle. See you next time.